Hey guys, it's Sonny, and I'm here with a ramble style video on this blog, the Project Rebalance combat and item changes. This is the first time I've done one of these videos, but I wanted to do it for this because it's probably one of the bigger blogs Jagex has released on this whole Project Rebalance thing. They cover a lot in here, and normally I kind of voice my opinions on Twitter, but just with the amount of stuff in this blog, I wanted to make a video to kind of flesh it out a little more. So I guess starting off, I've already read this blog and kind of spent some time today thinking about it. So I'm just gonna kind of skim over the text of it. If you want to read the blog, it'll be on Jagex's website, but I'm not gonna go through it word for word here. So starting off here, item adjustments, magic gear, and occult necklace. So this is a really big one I've been seeing on Reddit. A lot of people are upset. Basically, what they're doing here, they're nerfing the occult necklace and they're redistributing that damage amongst other like best in slot magic items. Personally, I think the idea behind it is good. I think occult being 10% is broken. I mean, this kind of first paragraph here sums it up pretty well, and that like occult just by itself is way better damage than basically everything else in Bis Mage setup. Maybe the numbers they could tweak it a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, the idea behind taking away occult damage, putting it into like augury damage, I think is a good idea. I think the mage sets are good to add it to sets other than ancestral. Although I mean, definitely Aram should be here in my opinion. I mean, we have Dagon High and Infinity, but no Aram set. Just give Arams like 1%, like Dagon High or like Infinity. You could even be like 1.5%, so it's right behind ancestral. I think that's fine too. So it's a little better than it's a little worse than Virtus, but it's a little better than the other one. So I think that's fine. I think the issue with this too, though, is if you do the calcs with these changes. So I think one thing they really should look at doing and would really help there are a lot of the feedback from Reddit. People saying, hey, if you don't have Bis Mage, this is kind of screwing up your setup. Well, I mean, there's room for them, especially between like Trident and Shadow. So Sang is only one max hit from Trident. And Shadow obviously is like a huge, huge upgrade from Sang and from Trident. So I think there's room to buff Sang, maybe give it 2 or 3 max hits over the Trident. That would be fine. I mean, it's not going to change any metas. It's just going to make Sang a little more usable when you're saving up for a Trident. And it'll make, it'll give you some variety. So you say, oh, I can't afford maybe full ancestral, but you buy a Sang staff and Virtus, and that could give you enough bonus there. So I think that's one way to do it. But I think the issue with these numbers is they put them right now. So if you were to use with all these numbers here that they've proposed, if you were to use a Shadow with full max mage and augury, you would actually gain 2 max hits on task. And I think it's only one max hit off task, but you're still gaining max hits on the Shadow versus where we're at now. So we're giving the Shadow a buff basically, in full Bis Mage. Which I mean, if you're using a Shadow, you should be using full Bis Mage anyway, just because of the way the Shadow scales. And right now, I think Shadow needs a nerf in and of itself. I mean, they even talked about it when they were proposing Coliseum rewards. They said, hey, we'd like to do Abyss Mage, but we just can't because the way Shadow works. If we added it, it would just, it would increase power levels too much. So I think really the issue here, I think these numbers are good. I think the idea of taking away from Occult is good. I think we can add maybe some max hits from Sang, but I think Shadow needs to be addressed. I mean, I think that's really the biggest one here. Then going down here, Soul Reaper Axe. I think this is fine. I mean, obviously I'm a main. I don't use the Soul Reaper Axe really anywhere, but it's got good utility actually. I mean, it's not a bad weapon, especially if you're an Iron Man before a scythe. It's really good in Tob, but the issue is it's tough to use in Tob because of all the delays. You would lose your stacks. You run the Soap Maze, you would lose all your stacks at Soap Maze, like P2 when Berserk spawns crabs. You lose your stacks, stuff like that. So I think these changes here are good. I think this will put Soul Reaper in a good spot, and I don't really think much more needs to be done, to be honest. Then the next one, probably one of the bigger ones on here, Elder Maul. So what they're proposing here is that Elder Maul gets a spec, so it reduces target's defense by 35%, versus the Dragon Warhammer right now reduces it by 30%, and it's the same spec energy, Elder Maul is the same speed as Dragon Warhammer, so both 6 ticks, so no DPS difference there. I think this is a really good change. I think this would put Elder Maul in a great spot, personally. The accuracy, I think it's like 12 accuracy over Dragon Warhammer and Avernic, which is like a 1% higher chance to hit. So that, the accuracy part, maybe you could buff the accuracy even a little more, add like an extra 20, 25 crush bonus onto the Elder Maul. But I think outside of that, I think this is a great change. I've seen one issue people brought up is PvP. And I mean, that would have to be addressed. It really, you could make an entire video about the issues with PvP and how it's basically backed the game into a corner because it's impossible to balance everything around PvM and PvP. But I don't. I would be very disappointed if we weren't able to see these changes just because of the small community of. And let's be honest, it is a small community of like one defense and Zerker Pures who are going to be MSBing into Elder Mauling into drug double Gmaul stacks. I think I'd be really disappointed if we weren't able to see this change because of that. So the next one on here, Inquisitor armor and mace. Basically, they're just giving the mace a buff if you have the full set. I think that's fine. It makes Inquisitor. This will make Inquisitor and the mace bis at Vasani's when before it was just Inquisitor and Scythe. I think that's good. I mean, it makes sense thematically for the full armor from the monster to be best at that monster. That's kind of a theme in old school, is that monsters drop the thing that's best at killing them. So I think this is fine. I like this change. I mean, I don't think we really need to do much more. I think Inquisitor being kind of a niche set as is fine. I think Torva should be better than it. So I don't think we need to make any more changes there. This one is a big one, the Void Waker spec. So basically, they want to adjust the special attack so it doesn't give a guaranteed hit, and then it rolls on 200% accuracy either against slash or mage defense. This one is definitely one of the proposals that I really don't like. I think, and a lot of people would voice this opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with Void Waker right now in PvM. PvP, I don't even think it's that broken in PvP, to be honest, but if they want to try to address it for there, that's fine. But for PvM, I think it's fine. I mean, yeah, it guarantees a hit, but also you got to understand that it's competing against other special attack weapons, specifically claws, and claws are just really good. So for Void Waker to be, comparable to claws, it also has to be really good. And so, this change would just make it really bad to use. I actually have this calc here. So this is from Twitter. Someone ran these numbers. So if the Void Waker nerf goes through, this would be your spec accuracy, so your chance to hit against certain monsters. The one thing here, you look at there, 61% chance to hit next in max gear. I mean, that's going to feel horrible. Zebak, Baba, we've got a 57% chance, a 36% chance to hit Kefri. I mean, if we go through with this nerf, Void Waker is going to be completely useless. And I was thinking about if they do want to do something to Void Waker, what we could do. And personally, I think, a solution could be to, if you go through with this nerf, to also from Tormented Demons, which is the upcoming monster from While Gothic Sleeps, we still don't have a reward from that. So they used to drop claws, they pulled it, and people said they don't want them to drop claws anymore. So we still need a reward space from Tormented Demons. And I think if you add like some sort of attachment to the Void Waker, so you nerf the Void Waker and then Tormented Demons drops an attachment where you get the attachment, it's tradable, you add it to your Void Waker and it goes back to the way it is now. I think that would be a decent solution. I mean, that you're kind of keeping the theme of Tormented Demons or dropping a spec weapon, or at least some sort of augmentation to a spec weapon. It would definitely give them some value and would be a good drop. But I just think at the end of the day, Void Waker needs to kind of be in the same spot it is right now, or else it's going to be completely useless. Next one, Ancient Godsword. This is just a PvP change, so I think this is fine. You're just changing the way the heal works. It's not a big deal. Contentious one here, the Dragon Warhammer. So they want to change the drop rate from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 3,000. For this one, honestly, I don't think, I know 1 in 5,000, it's a big number, and it's big and scary, and people go, oh, 1 in 5,000, that's terrible. But at the end of the day, you look at it, that's about a 30-hour grind on rate from Shamans. And yeah, like shamans aren't the most fun thing in the world, but you're also, if you look at Iron Man mode, I mean, what other items, like a bunch of items are around the same time. Like Bofa is 50 hours on rate. Blowpipe is like 20 hours on rate if you're doing it before you get a BOFA. It's a little less on rate if you have a BOFA. But I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's kind of around that 30-hour grind. And then once you start getting, you get your Dragon Warhammer, you go to Chambers and everything. And especially now that they want the Elder Maul to be the kind of the buff Dragon Warhammer, and the Elder Maul from Chambers is like 400 hours on rate to get. So in the grand scheme of things, 30 hours for an Iron Man is really nothing. If they want to go through with changes, I think a good compromise is you could keep the 1 in 5,000 and then just make it 1 in 3,000 on Slayer task. So you're actually kind of giving an incentive to do shamans on task, but you're also not making the rate such a big difference that you're basically locking the Dragon Warhammer behind the Slayer task, which is kind of what you do with the Basilisk Nightjaw. So I think that would be a fine compromise, but as is, just a straight up, buff across the board. I don't think that's really needed right now. So next one here, Nightmare and Fasani's Nightmare. They're buffing rates across that. I think that's fine. I mean, Nightmare rates are like crazy, crazy high. So I think a buff here is probably needed. I mean, I don't think anyone's really arguing against that. Then we have, this is probably the one I have the most issue with, is this minimum hit adjustment. So for some background, Jagex originally proposed this a while ago, and they mentioned in the blog what they had proposed is, so right now if you pass your accuracy check, you roll between a 0 and your max hit. So let's say your max hit's a 10, you roll anywhere from a 0 to a 10. So you could pass accuracy check to quote unquote hit, but still hit a 0. This is especially bad on low levels, right? They mentioned it. So if your max hit is a 1, half the time you pass your accuracy check, you're hitting a 0. So, you're getting kind of hosed there. So they've proposed, originally what they had said is basically now you start rolling from 1 to your max hit. So if your max hit's a 10, you would roll from 1 to 10. Well, in this blog, they've adjusted it. So they've said, well, because that would buff basically every weapon across the board. So their new proposal is that you roll anywhere from 1 to your max hit minus 1. So let's say your max hit is a 10. Now you're either going to hit anywhere from a 1 to a 9. So you can't hit a 10 anymore. They say this, would buff low level. It says early game. DPS is unchanged aside from extreme early game stages, which should feel much better. This only buffs DPS for level 3s that can hit 1. So if your max hit is a 1, before you would roll anywhere from a 0 to a 1. Now you would roll a 1 every time, basically. So if your max hit is a 1, your DPS is increased. Once your max hit goes to a 2, your DPS is actually decreased. Because instead of, well, it stays the same actually. So your DPS is the same from 2, and then from 2 onwards. So your DPS is unchanged, but it's only increased for level 3s. So hitting 1s as a max hit. The issue with this though, so they say, DPS isn't changed. First of all, I mean, changing max hits is just going to feel horrible. Like you're going to be hitting 59s with a scythe. Then there's also like the way hits work in the game. They would really have to be careful about making sure this didn't mess up, because this could really inadvertently nerf the scythe super hard. So the way the scythe hits work is your first hit rolls a max hit, then your second hit rolls half of your max hit rounded down, and then your third hit is half of that second hit rounded down. So right now the scythe max hit, the first hit is a 50, the second is a 25, and the third is a 12, right? So that's an 87 max hit. That's your scythe in full max melee gear, no slayer task, no salve, whatever. After these changes, the issue would be if they make, so your first max hit is a 49, then the second one, if they make it roll off of that 49, so then that's a 24.5, but then you round that down, so that's a 24, but then subtract 1, so you roll a 49, a 23, and then your next one off the 23, 11.5, rounded down minus 1 is a 10. So you're giving the scythe a huge nerf if you're making it so that that second hit rolls off the 49 versus the 50. So basically, for this to work, the scythe's max hit would need to go from a 50 25 12 down to a 49 24 11. So that would go to an 84. So if your scythe's max hit goes from an 83 or from an 87 to an 84, then the DPS wouldn't be changed. And this also works for Venator Bow. You would have to look at it for Venator Bow. Dragon Claws have similar mechanics. But then it would also change kind of thresholds. So they mentioned, like, for Colosseum, for instance, you max hit every style, but now your max hit is one less. So you might not be able to bring a four-way mage switch to max hit the melee friend anymore. So this really changes like a ton of metas in the game. I don't think it's really needed. I mean, I just think it's a bad idea. Honestly, you're not buffing anyone. You're buffing level threes, and you're making combat feel worse. And then you're also just introducing like the opportunity for you're introducing the opportunity to really like royally fuck up a couple of key items. Personally, I think I would be fine with them just doing the original proposal, rolling from 1 to your max hit. If they were to do that, they say you have buffs across the board. If you're running like full, so let's say for instance you're in full melee in a rapier, and they make this change, so now you don't hit zeros, you hit from 1 to your max hit. That's like a 1.5% buff to your rapier. It's pretty insignificant. And then they say, oh well, it would be and unproportionally like buff the scythe. It's a 3.5% buff to the scythe. And that's not crazy. The scythe, even after the kind of scythe changes they did earlier, is still the weakest mega rare. I mean, I don't think people would argue that still. I mean, out of the T-Bow, the Shadow, the scythe is still the cheapest out of the three. It's still the weakest. I mean, the Colosseum use helped the scythe a lot, but it still has a lot of limitations. And we're afraid of buffing the scythe 3.5%. But then also, keep in mind earlier in the blog, we're adding 2 max hits to the Shadow. And the Shadow is probably the best mega rare out of all of them. The difference between a Shadow and a Sang is like astronomical. So we're fine buffing the Shadow in full max and giving it a bigger than a 3.5% buff. But, we can't give the scythe a 3.5% buff. So we have to, basically change the way combat works for like the entire game. I think this is just too much. I think that first, either keep it from 1 to max hit, or if they really are, dead set on no, we don't want to change any DPS, then just find a way to make it so if you roll a hit and it's a 0, then it has a different color hit splat, like a red 0 hit splat. Because the biggest issue with rolling zeros on hits are for if you're doing content where you're doing special attacks, so you're trying to Dragon Warhammer something. So let's say you're at Tob or you're at Corp or whatever, and you're trying to track the amount of Dragon Warhammers they do. Well, if you roll a hit and it's a 0, your tracker doesn't know that it hit, so it doesn't know to take off the spec. If they made the hit splat red, so it was a red hit splat when it hit a 0, then that would work fine. Then you could start tracking that on the defense trackers, and you could see, oh, okay, it hit a 0, but it did drain your defense. You can keep going on with a fight. So that's another solution, but I think what they have here is just a bad idea. I don't think this would work in the game at all, and this is really the biggest. If there's any takeaway of this video, it's this section right here. This is a bad idea. Next one, early game combat prayers. I don't care at all about the whatever. It's like fucking level 5 prayers. I don't care. Autocast delay. This is fine. They're just going to remove the delay when you select an autocast. That's fine. I don't really care about that. Tob Verzik P2. This is a really good change. So the way Tob Verzik works right now is when P2 happens and she goes into a red crab phase, she spawns 2 red crabs. It's impossible to DPS it, do enough DPS to negate the healing of the red crabs. So you just have to tick eat the entire time. This is actually already in hard mode Tob. There's one red crab, so you can actually out DPS it. So it becomes a slow fight, but you don't have to sit there tick eating. You can actually kind of do the boss as intended. Only thing that they need to add here, they didn't mention anything on the Zap Attack that Verzik does. So in hard mode Tob, the Zap hits a 15, and in regular Tob, it hits a 50. So you're still tick eating basically the entire time in regular Tob. They should just change that, they should just change that in regular Tob so it hits a 15. Like it does in hard mode Tob, and then I think this is a huge quality of life for solo Tob. Tombs of a Masket Monkey Room. I like the changes they're doing here. So they're basically making it so the monkeys on the monkey room always take a max hit. The only thing I would like to see them add on there, they don't have anything for the baboon shamans or the cursed shamans or the cursed baboons, whatever the venom ones. I think I'd like to see those take a max hit too, and they could be like every style gives a max hit, right? That would be fine. I mean, you're probably going to end up shadowing them down anyway, depending on if you one hit them, but I think that should be a change to make those those should be, especially the cursed baboons, because not one hitting those and taking like 5 hits to kill them when they're ragging all of your tiles and then they drag you behind the monkey statue. It's like the most annoying thing in the world. So I think they should change that. And then the Baba only hits 25% down from 33%. This is nice, but I still think Red X is going to be kind of the meta at like 550s. Even with this change, I don't think it's going to make too big of a difference. I think there still needs to be I think they still need to do some more work. The kind of the work they did to Chambers the couple months ago, I think they need to do that with TOA and really address a lot of the issues with TOA. And this is a good, kind of short-term fix, but there's a lot more that needs to be done as far as like the invocation system, the reward drop rates. I mean, if we're nerfing Dragon Warhammer drop rates after 10 years, why can't we buff the TOA drop rates then? Because they're, completely broken. So, or nerf the TOA drop rates, sorry, to make the drops rarer because they're completely broken right now. So I think a lot more work needs to be done with TOA. But yeah, that's the blog. I think, like I mentioned, the biggest feedback, the key takeaways for me, I think the mage changes are good, but we need to do more work with the shadow. The shadow needs more work. I think the max hit changes are the biggest issue right now. I think as proposed, these are really really bad. They're gonna basically change the way the game plays. They're gonna mess with a bunch of metas, and they're just gonna make the game inadvertently just more annoying. And I think it's fine giving the buff across the board. It's really, like I say, it's 1.5%. It's not a big deal, and you're not buffing any early game players except level 3s with this. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So thanks if you guys watched all the way down here. I might be doing some more of these videos in the future if we get some big blogs like this that I've got a lot to talk about. But yeah, appreciate you guys watching, and follow me on Twitter if you don't already. I'm guessing you probably already came from there, but just in case if you don't, Sonny OSRS on Twitter. So thanks.